Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward, Chapter 21. We gathered up 2 horses, Stannon's nondescript gray mare, and I took the reins of a tall roan. I had never ridden a horse before, although I had seen Millie's parents do it before when I was young. Stannon quickly placed the bit and bridle with deft practiced movements. Unsure what to do, I tried to watch and learn. However, his hands were too quick for my untrained eye to follow. Not wanting to draw attention to myself, I simply tried to mount bareback on the tall roan. The horse danced away easily, rearing on its hind legs. A low chuckle followed from Stannon. He stepped forward, taking the reins, instilling instant obedience in the animal. He patted down the animal and held the reins fast. It would have to be worth it to see you try to ride bareback. Too bad it would be such a waste of good help getting your neck broken so easily. Stannon placed the saddle on this horse, moved the stirrups into place, and instructed me to get on the horse. I teetered precipitously before digging my hands into the saddle to find purchase. Refusing to let go, I managed to pull into the saddle, albeit only barely. "Oh, we'll have you riding in no time," Stannon chuckled again. His face went completely blank. His hand gripped at the reins tightly, stilling all other movement. I could see him go taut like a panther, waiting to strike. He stopped speaking, and I listened, dark eye intent on the edge of the stable. I exhaled slowly, not wanting to make a sound. I could faintly hear the scuffle of feet outside the stable, although it wasn't clear if they were approaching or simply moving in another direction, towards the main thoroughfare. I counted 18 heartbeats before Stannon moved again, this time with increased alacrity. His manner had darkened. He spared not a word while he prepared the horses. Launching himself up into the saddle in a single burst of motion, he slowly led the animal forward, towards the edge of the shadowed stables. Stannon waited another space of heartbeats before giving the hand signal to move forward. I was sitting uneasily in the saddle, hoping not to pitch forward to the ground. Luckily, the tall roan did not seem too spirited, and followed my shaky commands with ease. I saw motion from beyond the stables, but could not make it out just yet, having not fully come into view. Stannon rode his horse casually, not giving anything away to observers. We continued quickly onto the main street, the sun coming to its zenith high above us. I was thankful for the wide-brimmed hat that covered my head, having taken it from the dead stable hand. He certainly had no need of it now. No sense letting something useful go to waste, although it had taken a moment for me to pick it up after what had happened to the young man, wherever he had gone. Stannon had been non-committal on the subject, and I didn't have the desire to press him on it. My usefulness was still an uncertain thing. Should the winds of fortune change, and I became a liability in any way, I knew he wouldn't hesitate. My mind refused to fill in the image. I brought myself back to things I could control, at least to some degree. As we crossed under the high adobe walls marking the small town, the sand dunes rose in all their terrible splendor before us. A small tread of sand marked the bleak trail that led forward and out of sight over the hills of sand. I could see the waves of heat form an image that wavered in front of me. It shook and undulated, unnerving to my tired mind. A mirage, nothing more. And yet, my mind wanted to believe so desperately that it began detailing the lines of a far-off city, traced in the sand. It had gleaming peaks of polished gold, spires that rose, reaching into the sky like the fingertips of a Goliath, forgotten by time. Sand and wind blew in front of my face. I wanted to believe. I could feel the reins jerk steadily. We plodded along with a somber feeling in the air. Wind and sand, nothing more. And yet I could still see the unmistakable spires of gold. Painted murals filled the city walls. Colorful images painted by artisans of unequaled skill rose together in unison, reaching to the edge of the city's walls. I blinked and closed my eyes, trying to sear the image into the back of my eyelids, not wanting to let go of the beauty I had seen. With resignation, I opened my eyes again. The image remained. I blinked again, this time certain it was a symptom of my delirium. I could still see the shining towers and spires rising into the sky. They must be thousands of spans tall for me to see them at this great distance. What I was seeing could only be the product of a fuddled mind. Looking over to Stannon, he moved with determination and purpose. He knew the path, if indeed there was a path. "Where are we heading?" I queried cautiously. "Save your breath. Words have no purpose out here. No one will ever remember you. Here we are nothing against the sand and sky. Less than dust. Stannon angled his tread, as if he had an inner compass pulling him forward towards our destination. His gaze traced across the landscape, head swinging in a slow arc. Kane felt unease. The rolling dunes crested and fell away beneath them as they passed, silent save for the endless blowing wind. Gusts of sand buffeted them, pelting hot fire in their faces. The wind had a life unto itself. They were far beyond the reaches of humanity out here. The old ancient gods called in their nameless whispers to any who would listen. Whole caravans of men had disappeared among the sands, never to reappear. Strange objects had been found out in the sand, alien and cryptic. Urns 50 feet tall, for no known purpose, stood like statues past a high formation of rock and sand. Mystic carvings could be seen etched into their sides. The combined manpower required to build such a colossal object would have required an entire nation of people working in tandem for years to construct. The strangeness took physical form out in the sands. Kane knew things to exist that most people would consider only far-fetched legends, if not outright blasphemy. Kane's knowledge only scraped the surface of what was possible. His hand against the cold sheath of the shadow blade confirmed that truth. A young boy had been lost for a year and a day out in the sands, only to arrive again one day in perfect health, and with no knowledge of the time that had passed. Strange tattoos were found on his back, beneath the base of his skull. He had been dressed in impossibly fine garments that no known artisan had been able to replicate on this side of the continent. Better to forget what he saw, Kane thought. Bring his mind back to the task at hand. His wound that had been covered earlier itched dully. It plucked at his concentration as he moved ever onward, the boy silently trailing him. The boy had proven useful against his expectations. He smiled at that thought, and wondered how else he could make use of him in the coming weeks. He would have no knowledge of intrigue, but there were other orders he could perform. Using him as a pawn in the deadly game would be best. He would keep himself out of sight until the last possible movement. It would be slow, but cautious. He could never be too cautious. Kane let slip a low laugh, then felt it move through his body into full laughter. The boy remained silent. Wiping his hand against his mouth, brushing away sand, Kane began to plan.